Got fired by my director for helping my aunt after a fire. Said I couldn't handle real pressure. My world tilted on its axis the moment I heard those words. You're fired. Fired. After 5 years, countless late nights, and unwavering dedication. And the reason? Because I dared to prioritize family when my aunt's house burned to the ground. Was I wrong to leave? Did I overreact? Did I panic like she said? What would you have done? The Savannah air hung thick and heavy with humidity the day I lost my job. It was a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays were always budget meetings. The kind where you sat for hours, squinting at spreadsheets, praying for a fire alarm to break the monotony. Little did I know, a real fire was about to change everything. My Aunt Clara called me around 11. Her voice was a strangled whisper. It's gone, she choked out. Everything. The fire. She didn't need to say more. I knew her little cottage on the outskirts of town. Knew the flower boxes overflowing with petunias. The porch swing where she had read me stories as a child. Gone. I walked straight into my director, Ms. Eleanor Vance's, office. The office was immaculate, sterile almost. A stark contrast to the organized chaos of my own desk. She looked up from her computer, her expression unreadable. Ms. Vance, I need to leave. My aunt's house. Aunt, she interrupted, her voice sharp. What about the Henderson conference? We're finalizing details. We need you here. Ms. Vance, her house burned down. She's lost everything. I need to be there for her. This conference is crucial. Millions are riding on it. Can't someone else handle it? A neighbor? The fire department? The cool Savannah drawl dripped with disdain. No, she's alone. I'm all she has. I'll work double time when I get back, I promise. But I have to go, I pleaded, praying she would understand. Her eyes narrowed. This is a crucial time for the company. Showing up is a priority. If you leave now, it would show me a lack of commitment. Now get back to work. That commitment line. It always irked me, but I couldn't stay. Not then. I grabbed my purse and ran. The image of Clara's petunias turning to ash burned into my mind. The drive felt like an eternity. The closer I got, the thicker the smoke became, stinging my eyes and coating my throat. The charred remains of Clara's cottage were even worse than I imagined. The sweet scent of petunias was replaced by the acrid smell of burnt wood and despair. Clara sat on a lawn chair, wrapped in a Red Cross blanket, her face streaked with soot and tears. When she saw me, she reached for me, her grip surprisingly strong. Thank God you're here, she whispered. I spent the insurance form's temporary housing, replacing essential medications. Sleep was a luxury. I lived on coffee and adrenaline, fueled by a fierce determination to help her rebuild her life. On Thursday, I called Miss Vance. I should be back in the office tomorrow, I said, my voice raspy from exhaustion and smoke. I've been checking emails remotely, and everything seems to be under control. I'll be ready to help set up for the Henderson conference. Don't bother, she said, her voice cold. We managed without you. In fact, things ran quite smoothly. I think it's best if we part ways. HR will contact you with the details. Part ways, what did she mean? I fought to keep my voice steady. Are you firing me? Let's just say your actions demonstrated a lack of commitment to the company and an inability to handle real pressure. We need someone who can prioritize what's important, someone who can handle the heat. She hung up. The heat. Irony, right? My entire world went up in flames, and she was worried about a conference. I went to HR on Friday, stunned. The severance package was minimal, barely enough to cover a month's rent. As I signed the papers, the HR rep, a young woman named Sarah, gave me a sympathetic look. I'm so sorry, she murmured. This wasn't my decision. Whose was it? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She hesitated, then leaned closer. Vance has been stressed. The Henderson budget is under scrutiny. There were some discrepancies. She looked around nervously. Just be careful. Discrepancies. What kind of discrepancies? And what did they have to do with me? Back at my apartment, a tiny, overpriced space overlooking the river, I felt numb. Fired, just like that. 5 years of dedication, loyalty, and hard work, dismissed because I helped my aunt. Was I too naive? Should I have just sucked it up and stayed at the office? That night, my husband, Mark, came home late. He worked as an accountant for a different company, a stable, reliable job. He always seemed so level-headed. I told him everything, the fire, the firing, the cryptic warning from Sarah in HR. He listened patiently, holding my hand. "I'm so sorry, honey," he said. "That's awful, but don't worry, we'll figure it out. You can file for unemployment and we'll cut back on expenses. You'll find something better, I promise." His words were comforting, but something felt off. He avoided eye contact. He seemed distant. I felt guilty about burdening her when she was already dealing with so much. But she was my rock. She kept reminding me that I did the right thing, that family always came first. One afternoon, Clara received a package in the mail. It was addressed to her old address, her burned-down cottage, but somehow it had been forwarded. Inside was a brochure for the Henderson conference. "That's strange," she said, flipping through the pages. "Why would they send this to me?" I shrugged. "Probably a mistake. Just toss it." But then I noticed something. Tucked inside the brochure was a printed document, a budget, the Henderson conference budget. It was different from the one I remembered working on. Different numbers, different allocations, and it was dated the day after I was fired. "Clara, let me see that," I said, my heart pounding. As I scanned the document, my blood ran cold. Something was terribly wrong. Numbers were inflated, expenses were duplicated. It was blatant fraud. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew it was connected to my firing. Ms. Vance had said the budget was under scrutiny. Was this why? Was I fired because I knew too much? "Mark," I said that night after he came home from work, "I need your help. I think I stumbled onto something illegal at work. Something with the Henderson conference budget." He stiffened. "What are you talking about?" I showed him the document. He took it, his face pale. He examined it carefully, his brow furrowed. This is just a draft," he said, his voice strained. "It doesn't mean anything. It's not a draft, Mark. It's dated after I left. And the numbers are all wrong. Look at these inflated catering costs, the duplicate invoices." He slammed the document down on the table. "You're jumping to conclusions. You're letting your emotions get the better of you. You got fired, and now you're trying to find someone to blame." "I'm not blaming anyone. I'm just asking for your help. You're an accountant. You know about these things. Can you at least look into it?" I was pleading now. He turned away. "I don't want to get involved in your drama. Just let it go. Find a new job. Move on." His reaction was strange, defensive. Why didn't he want to help? Was he hiding something? The seed of suspicion had been planted, and I couldn't ignore it. I went through his computer. I know, it was wrong. A violation of trust. But I felt like I was drowning, and I needed to find something to hold on to. His email was password protected, but I knew his birthday. It was the first password I tried. And there it was, an email from Eleanor Vance. Subject: Henderson budget. The date was the day I was fired. The email contained the revised budget, the one I found with Clara, and it contained instructions on how to reroute funds, how to cover up discrepancies. The email also mentioned a name: David. David will handle the payments. He knows what to do. David. Who was David? I felt sick, betrayed. Not just by Miss Vance, but by Mark. He knew. He had to have known. I printed the email and the budget. I needed proof. I needed to understand what was going on. That evening, when Mark came home, I confronted him. I laid the documents on the table. "Explain this," I said, my voice trembling. He stared at the documents, his face ashen. He didn't say anything for a long time. I can explain, he stammered. Then explain it, I demanded. Tell me why my boss was emailing you about a fraudulent budget. Tell me why you lied to me. Tell me who David is. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. David is my cousin, he confessed. He works in accounting at Vance's company, Eleanor. Eleanor needed someone to help her reroute the funds. She offered him a cut, a big cut. He asked me for advice. And you helped him? I was incredulous. You helped him cover up fraud, knowing that it would cost me my job? He hung his head. I didn't know she was going to fire you, he mumbled. I swear, I thought it was a way to help David. He's been struggling, and maybe get a little something for us too. A little something, I repeated, my voice rising. You were willing to sacrifice my career, my livelihood, for a little something? It wasn't like that, he protested weakly. I never wanted to hurt you. But you did hurt me, Mark. You betrayed me. You lied to me. You chose money over me. How can I ever trust you again? My voice cracked. He reached for me, but I recoiled. Don't touch me, I said. Just go. He left, and I sat there, alone, surrounded by the evidence of his betrayal. What would you do? Would you forgive him? Could you? I spent the job hunting was impossible. I couldn't focus. I kept replaying the conversation with Mark in my head, trying to understand how he could do this to me. Clara was a lifeline. She listened without judgment, offering comfort and support. You're strong, she said. You'll get through this, and you'll come out stronger on the other side. But strength wasn't enough. I needed justice. I needed to expose Eleanor Vance and her fraudulent scheme. But how? I decided to call Sarah, the HR rep. I knew it was risky, but I had nothing to lose. She answered the phone hesitantly. Hello? Sarah, it's Protagonist. We spoke last week about my firing. There was a long pause. I shouldn't be talking to you. I know, but I need your help. I have evidence that Eleanor Vance is involved in fraud. I have documents, emails. I can't help you, she said, her voice trembling. If I get caught. Sarah, she fired me. She ruined my life, and she's getting away with it. Don't you want to see her held accountable? I pleaded. There was a moment of silence, then she sighed. Okay, she said softly. Meet me at the coffee shop on Broughton Street. Tomorrow, at noon, but don't tell anyone. She looked nervous, constantly glancing around. I can't stay long, she said, handing me a flash drive. This contains all the emails and financial records related to the Henderson conference. Everything. But be careful. Eleanor is powerful, and she has connections. Thank you, I said, clutching the flash drive. You're very brave. I'm just tired of being afraid, she said. Good luck. I took the flash drive to a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Ms. Peterson. She examined the evidence carefully, her expression grim. This is serious, she said. This is fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. We can file a lawsuit against Eleanor Vance and the company, and we can also report this to the authorities. What about Mark? I asked. He was involved too. He knew about it. Ms. Peterson frowned. If he knowingly participated in the scheme, he could face criminal charges. Are you willing to testify against your husband? That was the question, wasn't it? Could I betray Mark, the man I loved, even after he betrayed me? It wasn't easy. Turning Mark in felt like betraying a part of myself. But I knew it was the right thing to do. He needed to be held accountable for his actions. The lawsuit was filed, and the authorities were notified. The investigation was swift and thorough. Eleanor Vance was arrested and charged with multiple felonies. Mark was also charged, but he agreed to cooperate with the investigation in exchange for a reduced sentence. The news spread like wildfire. The company's stock plummeted, and its reputation was tarnished. Eleanor Vance lost everything: her job, her reputation, her freedom. I testified at the trial. It was grueling, emotionally draining. but I told the truth, the whole truth. And in the end, justice prevailed. Eleanor Vance was found guilty on all counts. She was sentenced to several years in prison. Mark received probation and a hefty fine. The trial was over, but the scars remained. My career was in shambles. My marriage was over. I had lost everything, but I had also gained something. I had gained my integrity back. I had stood up for what was right, even when it was difficult. And I had learned that family, honesty, and trust are the most important things in life. Clara helped me pick up the pieces. We moved into a small apartment together, a fresh start for both of us. One day, while volunteering at a local charity, I met another events coordinator. She had heard about my story and admired my courage. She offered me a job, working for a nonprofit organization that helped victims of natural disasters. It wasn't the high-powered corporate job I had before, but it was meaningful. I was making a difference in people's lives. And I was happy. I also started my own blog, sharing my story and offering advice to others who had experienced workplace betrayal. I wanted to help people avoid the mistakes I had made and find the strength to stand up for themselves. The blog became surprisingly popular. People from all over the world reached out to me, sharing their own stories of betrayal and resilience. It was incredibly rewarding to connect with others and offer them support. One day, I received an email from a publisher. They wanted to write a book about my story. I was hesitant at first, but then I realized that it was an opportunity to reach even more people and inspire them to overcome adversity. The book was a success. It became a bestseller, and I was invited to speak at conferences and events all over the country. I still think about Eleanor Vance and Mark sometimes. I don't hate them, but I don't forgive them either. I hope they learned their lesson. I hope they understand the damage they caused. As for me, I've moved on. I've found a new purpose in life. I'm helping others, I'm sharing my story, and I'm living my life with integrity and compassion. It wasn't the life I had planned, but it's a good life. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. What do you think? Did I make the right choices? How would you react? So here's the part where I ask you to like and subscribe for more true stories of survival and workplace drama. And don't forget to leave a comment and tell me what you'd do in my shoes. The book tour was unexpectedly healing. Hearing other people's stories, their pain, their resilience, it was a mirror reflecting my own journey. I started to see my experience not as a tragedy, but as a catalyst for change, both in my life and in the lives of others. One stop on the tour was in Atlanta, a city teeming with ambition and hidden stories. After my reading, a woman approached me, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "Your story, it reminded me so much of my own," she whispered. "My brother, he was fired from his job after he refused to cover up some financial irregularities. It broke him." I spent the evening with her, sharing our experiences, finding solace in our shared pain. It struck me how common these stories were, these silent betrayals lurking beneath the polished surface of the corporate world. I began to research corporate fraud, delving into the complex web of deceit and manipulation that often goes unnoticed. What I discovered was shocking. It wasn't just about money. It was about power, control, and the willingness to sacrifice anything, even human lives, to maintain it. This new understanding fueled my passion for advocacy. I wanted to create a platform where whistleblowers could share their stories, where victims of corporate greed could find support, where the truth could be exposed. The challenge was, how? How could I create something lasting, something that would make a real difference? I was at a crossroads. The book tour was winding down, and I needed to decide what to do. Should I continue writing, start a foundation, become a lawyer? I felt overwhelmed by the possibilities. One rainy afternoon, while browsing in a used bookstore, I stumbled upon a forgotten folder tucked away at the end of a shelf. A manila folder labeled simply, "Savannah Cases." Intrigued, I opened it. Inside were newspaper clippings, handwritten notes, and court documents. all related to various legal cases in Savannah's history. One case caught my eye. It was about a small business owner who had been defrauded by his business partner, a friend he had trusted implicitly. The details of the case were eerily familiar, mirroring my own experience in many ways. What happened to the business owner, I wondered. Did he ever recover from the betrayal? Did he ever find justice? The Abernathy. He was reluctant to talk at first, the pain of his father's experience still raw after. But I shared my story with him, my voice trembling as I recounted the details of my own betrayal. He listened intently, his eyes filled with empathy. "It never really goes away," he said softly. "The hurt, the anger, it stays with you, but you can learn to live with it. You can learn to find strength in it." He told me about his father's struggle to rebuild his life after the betrayal, how he had lost his business, his savings, his reputation, how he had spiraled into depression, his spirit crushed. But he also told me about his father's resilience, his determination to never give up, how he had eventually started a new business, smaller than the first, but built on honesty and integrity, how he had found happiness again, surrounded by his family and friends. His story was a reminder that even in the face of devastating betrayal, it was possible to heal, to rebuild, to find hope. It also reminded me of the power of storytelling, how sharing our experiences can connect us, inspire us, and help us find meaning in our pain. It's a strange situation, isn't it? How could I use my experience in this case now? That evening, while sitting on the porch of Clara's temporary home, the idea came to me. I would start a podcast where I would share stories of corporate betrayal, stories of resilience, stories of hope, a podcast where I would interview whistleblowers, victims, and experts, shedding light on the dark corners of the corporate world. A podcast where I would empower listeners to stand up for what's right, to speak out against injustice, to create a more ethical and transparent business environment. I learned about recording equipment, editing software, and marketing strategies. It was a steep learning curve, but I was determined to make it work. I decided to call the podcast The Betrayal Files, a simple, direct title that captured the essence of what it was about. My first guest was Sarah, the HR rep who had helped me expose Eleanor Vance. She was nervous about appearing on the podcast, afraid of the potential repercussions, but I reassured her that her identity would be protected, that her voice would be disguised, that her story would be told with sensitivity and respect. Her interview was powerful. She shared her experience working in a toxic corporate environment, her struggle to reconcile her conscience with her loyalty to her employer, her fear of speaking out against injustice. Her story resonated with listeners all over the world. The Betrayal Files quickly gained popularity. I started receiving emails from people who had been inspired to speak out against wrongdoing in their own workplaces. People who had found the courage to report fraud, harassment, and discrimination. People who had one email stood out. It was from a woman named Emily, who worked as an accountant for a large corporation. She had discovered that her boss was embezzling money from the company, and she was afraid to report it. She had seen what happened to other whistleblowers, how they were ostracized, harassed, and even fired. But after listening to the Betrayal Files, she decided to take a risk. She gathered evidence, consulted with a lawyer, and reported the embezzlement to the authorities. Her boss was eventually arrested and charged with multiple felonies. Emily was hailed as a hero. She received awards, recognition, and a new job offer from a different company. But more importantly, she found peace of mind. She knew that she had done the right thing, even though it had been difficult. Emily's story was a testament to the power of one person to make a difference. It also reinforced my belief that the Betrayal Files was making a real impact in the world. What could I have done more of? Then I received a letter in the mail. It was from Mark. He was writing from prison. He apologized for his actions, expressing remorse for the pain he had caused me. He said that he had made a terrible mistake, motivated by greed and desperation. He acknowledged that he had betrayed my trust, and he understood why I could never forgive him. But he also said that he hoped that one day I would be able to find peace. I read his letter with a mix of emotions: anger, sadness, confusion, and a flicker of pity. What would you do with this? Did he truly understand the depth of his betrayal? Could he ever be truly redeemed? I didn't know, and maybe I never would. But I realized that holding on to anger and resentment was only hurting me. It was time to let go. It was time to forgive. Not for him, but for myself. What do you do with that feeling? I wrote him back. I didn't forgive him explicitly, but I told him that I hoped that he would use his time in prison to reflect on his actions and make amends for the harm he had caused. I also told him that I wished him well. That was the end of our story. I closed that chapter of my life, and I moved on. I continued to host the Betrayal Files, sharing stories of corporate betrayal, resilience, and hope. I became an advocate for whistleblowers, fighting to protect their rights and ensure that they are treated fairly. I found happiness again, surrounded by my family, my friends, and my work. What new steps could I take? Years passed. The Betrayal Files evolved. It wasn't just a podcast anymore. It became a movement, a community of people committed to ethical business practices, transparency, and justice. I started receiving invitations to speak at universities, business schools, and corporate conferences. I shared my story, my insights, and my vision for a better world. I challenged audiences to think critically about the ethical implications of their actions, to prioritize integrity over profit, and to stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult. I began mentoring young entrepreneurs, helping them build businesses based on ethical principles. I wanted to create a new generation of leaders who would prioritize people, planet, and purpose over profit. One of my mentees, a bright and ambitious young woman named Aisha, came to me with a dilemma. She had discovered that her company was using conflict minerals in its products, minerals that were funding armed conflicts in the Democratic Republic of Congo. She knew that it was wrong, but she was afraid to speak out. She was afraid of losing her job, of being ostracized, of being blacklisted in her industry. I listened to her concerns, and I shared my own experiences. I reminded her of the importance of integrity, of standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult. I encouraged her to gather evidence, consult with a lawyer, and report the company's actions to the authorities. She took my advice, and she became a whistleblower. Her actions led to a major investigation, a series of arrests, and a significant shift in the company's sourcing practices. Aisha became a symbol of courage and integrity. She was hailed as a hero, and she inspired countless others to speak out against wrongdoing. Seeing Aisha's success was incredibly rewarding. It confirmed my belief that one person can make a difference, that even the smallest act of courage can have a ripple effect. It also reminded me that my own journey, my own pain, had not been in vain. My experiences had led me to a place where I could help others, where I could make a positive impact on the world. Was I doing the most I could? One sunny afternoon, while visiting Clara, I received a phone call from Miss Peterson, my lawyer. She had some news about Eleanor Vance. Eleanor had been released from prison. She had served her time, and she was now trying to rebuild her life. Ms. Peterson had received a request from Eleanor's lawyer, asking if I would be willing to meet with her. I was stunned. Why would Eleanor want to meet with me? What could she possibly want to say? I was hesitant at first. I didn't know if I was ready to face her again. But Ms. Peterson encouraged me to consider it. She said that it might be an opportunity for closure, for healing, for understanding. After much soul-searching, I agreed to meet with Eleanor. We met at a neutral location, a quiet cafe in a small town a few hours away from Savannah. I arrived early, my heart pounding. I felt a mix of nervousness, anger, and curiosity. What would she say? How would she act? Would she apologize? Would she take responsibility for her actions? Eleanor arrived a few minutes later. She looked different, older, thinner, and somehow humbled. She wore a simple dress, and her hair was pulled back in a plain bun. She seemed smaller. We sat down at a table, and there was a long, awkward silence. "I wanted to apologize," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "For everything, for what I did to you, for what I did to Mark, for what I did to the company." She looked at me, her eyes filled with tears. "I know that I can never undo the harm that I caused, but I want you to know that I am truly sorry." "Why now?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Why after I was so focused on power, on control, on money, that I lost sight of what was truly important? I sacrificed everything, my integrity, my relationships, my happiness, for the sake of ambition. And in the end, it all came crashing down." She paused, taking a deep breath. "I spent my time in prison reflecting on my actions. I read books, I meditated, I attended therapy. I came to realize that my life had been built on a foundation of lies and deceit, and that I needed to change." She looked at me pleadingly. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I hope that one day you will be able to understand that I was lost, that I was misguided, that I was ultimately wrong." I listened to her words, my mind racing. Was she being sincere, or was this just another manipulation, another attempt to gain my sympathy? I didn't know, but I decided to give her the benefit of the doubt. "I appreciate your apology," I said, "but it doesn't change what happened. You hurt a lot of people. You caused a lot of damage." "I know," she said, "and I will spend the rest of my life trying to make amends." She told me that she was now working for a non-profit organization that helped former prisoners reintegrate into society. She said that she was using her experience to help others avoid the mistakes she had made. She seemed genuinely remorseful. But even so, what would you do? Could you believe it? The meeting lasted for several hours. We talked about everything: my firing, Mark's involvement, the trial, my career, her time in prison. We shared our perspectives, our feelings, our regrets. By the end of the meeting, I felt a sense of release. Not forgiveness, not exactly, but a sense of closure. I realized that I didn't need to hold on to anger and resentment anymore. I could let go of the past and move on with my life. We shook hands, and Eleanor left. As I watched her walk away, I felt a wave of compassion. Compassion for her pain, her regret, her struggle to rebuild her life. We each have our own paths to take, our own challenges to overcome, and our own lessons to learn. I don't know if Eleanor will ever truly be redeemed, but I hope that she will continue to strive to be a better person. As for me, I will continue to share my story, to advocate for justice, and to inspire others to live with integrity and compassion. Because in the end, that's all that really matters: making the world a better place. I'm proud of myself for moving forward. This, I think, is where I'm meant to be. Looking back, that fire, Eleanor's betrayal, Mark's deceit, they were all painful chapters, but they weren't the whole story. They were the prelude to a life richer, more meaningful than I could have ever imagined. My life is filled with purpose. I lead a thriving organization dedicated to helping whistleblowers. I'm surrounded by honest colleagues. Even Clara, with her rebuilt home, flowers blooming brighter than ever, reminds me daily of the importance of family. The scars remain, of course. They're etched into my heart, a reminder of the lessons I learned. But they don't define me. They've shaped me into the person I am today, stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. And that, I realized, is a victory in itself. What an inspiring picture this all creates. What do you want to see me do? I'd appreciate your support.